Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. We are so excited today to bring you a brilliant gentleman who all of the things that are in his life and the things that he does just get us so excited because it's about education, it's about creativity, it's about the spoken word poetry, it's about inspiring people and educators and kids and leaders. And I was introduced to him by a mutual friend, and I'm just so excited to welcome LeDerick Horne to the show today. LeDerick, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. So great to be here.
So, as you may know, we talk about the reset, rise, and reveal of your brilliance on the show. And the reset is what we call the sucker punch. That thing that kind of, hits you, knocks you for a loop, and you're going, wait a minute, this wasn't how things were supposed to go. And that can happen at any point in life. And I think yours happened when you were relatively young. So, take us into your story, and then we'll see how the progression of your brilliance has shown itself.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed early on in life when I was 9 years old with a learning disability, and I'm a part of the first generation of people to pass through what we now call special education. And the school district I was a part of didn't do the best job of really making us feel like we were empowered, that our minds were valued. And so I dealt with just a lot of low self-esteem or poor self-image for most of my childhood. And things really came to a head for me when I was 17 years old in my junior year of high school, facing graduation and really facing the terror of graduation because my reading skills were so low, my math skills were so low that I didn't think I would be able to go on to get a career that would sustain me or make me feel like I had work that really spoke to any sort of purpose in the world, you know? And I also didn't think that I intellectually had what it took to go to college. I had never seen anyone who had gone to college and was also a person who had struggled as much as I had academically. And so in the winter of my junior year, I had what I call an emotional breakdown. I was expending so much energy with trying to pass for normal, to try to put up the facade that I was just like every other student. And I just couldn't maintain that expenditure of energy anymore. And so I sort of crashed.
Wow.
Go ahead, Kay.
So it's interesting to me. You're saying, I think that you just with one little phrase encapsulated what folks like you go through with in the space of talking about invisible disabilities, right? So this learning disability that people don't notice right away. And you said facing graduation, like, with the word terror in there, as opposed to what graduation typically is: anticipation, excitement. And you were the complete opposite. But I think you're also verbalizing a lot of what the overachievers like I grew up as, that stress of, oh gosh, how am I going to maintain this? I have all this pressure. It's like, both ends of the spectrum. But saying facing graduation really sets the stage of just how much stress having that invisible disability and not having the right support brought onto you.
Yeah. My senior year, like all senior years, were full of plenty of rituals that were supposed to be about celebrating this moment, whether it be the prom, and I didn't go to the prom, or actually going to, the cap and gown, go walk down the aisle graduation. I didn't go to that because I didn't feel like my school had treated me well. Now I can also tell you that I had some amazing teachers, I can remember my very first special ed teacher, Miss Yates, Miss Priscilla Yates. So great. I remember her first and last name. Miss Yates was not only an excellent educator, I knew that she really loved all of us. And I could feel that love throughout even some of my darker times as I got older. And she's just one example of a bunch of different teachers who were amazing. But nevertheless, the predominant cultural stance that I grew up in was the idea that if you were in special ed, you were not a great person, right? Like you didn't have what it took. You weren't on the same level as everybody else. And so, no, I didn't face graduation with a lot of joy in my heart, beyond the idea that now was my opportunity to remake myself. And so when I went through that breakdown when I was 17 years old, I used it as an opportunity to challenge a lot of the ideas that I had ingested about who I was, what my value was, what my possibilities were moving forward. And I realized, and I don't know if we have enough time, but just a lot of like picking through the library, coming up with a new narrative. And I realized that there was nothing wrong with me. That that although it seemed like the dominant society had sort of defined me as less than, that I actually felt like I was an awesome human being, and that I had a lot to offer the world. I didn't have all the steps in place. I didn't understand exactly how I was going to realize my fullest potential, but I began to get just very committed with making the next step. And for me, the next step began planning to go to college.
Wow. So before we get into that, Rise, where did that come from?
I was going to ask the same question. Like, how did you, this kid who grew up in this place of never feeling like you were quote unquote normal and trying to fit in, where did you find that strength of character and determination to suddenly make that mental switch?
Well, I think I've always been a pretty tough person, right? And I think I come from tough people. My grandfather was born on a small farm in Glenwood, Georgia, and was a farmer and then a mechanic. And then he left the South to pursue both opportunity, but also to get away from white aggression. He basically said, if I stay here, I might have to kill somebody because I don't feel like I'm being treated well. And so he went up north and became a builder. I live in a house that my grandfather and my uncle built. They had a construction company. I built this house for a cousin of mine, and I bought it from him. And as I look around, I'm surrounded by members of my family. I was in Kenya last year at a boarding school that supports students with dyslexia. And I was telling them about what my neighborhood is like. And they're like, oh, you got a village. You got the village, right? But he became a leader of the NAACP during the heart of the civil rights movement. My father was a legendary track and cross country coach here in central New Jersey, Franklin Township. And like, the man built champions. He built champions, and he was really good at taking kids who were not the fastest, not the strongest, and giving them everything they needed to keep going. My mother's got an amazing attitude at life, right? And like, she's determined to be happy no matter what. And then again, I think the sort of the high expectations they set for me. There was never necessarily a, you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't get that sort of direction. Excuse me, but it was very clear to me that they expected me to be a good person. And so I think there was an element of that, the high achiever working with me, in me as well, because I knew that I was a smart person, right? And I knew that I had potential. I had just never seen anyone like me who had, gone on and done great things. And so, and I'm also surrounded by peers who were struggling. We were all just having, folks dropping out of school, getting pregnant early. I mean, there's a lot of that going on as well. And then, yeah, during that time period, I took like the winter of my junior year off of everything, every extracurricular activity. And I went into the library, and I went to the librarians with these big philosophical questions about who am I and where do I fit in the universe and all this sort of stuff. And so I did a deep dive into to Nietzsche, and I remember coming across the Buddha's first sermon and his reflections on suffering, the nature of suffering. There was a lot of Malcolm X and the idea that no one can make you a man, that if you want to be a man, you have to declare that and take that for yourself. And just through it all, I found what I needed to take that first step towards trying to live a better life.
Wow. So it sounds to me that you had what I had, because I grappled with a lot of things in high school too, because I just wasn't like everybody else. And I say in my book, my first book, Thriving Blind, I dedicated part of it to my parents, because I said, I was raised in unconditional love. And I believe, looking back on my journey, and I'm listening to yours, that sets you up to thrive. You know, no matter what happens, it does set you up to thrive. It's like a foundation that if that isn't there, that's where I see a lot of breakdowns. But I'm also hearing that you were raised like I was, that you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And that came from, we had some struggle in my family, and I have 4 brothers, and they weren't all raised with that mantra, but I was, that Kristen, you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
thanks
was,
a lot. I had to do hard things,
right.
but it's not, I'm hearing similar things, but, and it's amazing. It's brilliant to me to listen to you at 17, that you went, and it's almost like you did your own little eat, pray, love, right? And you went and to the library. I just love that it's so relative, that eat, pray, love thing, because people kind of think, how can you go off into India? Like, I can't do that for a year. And you took your own little journey to remove yourself from all the chaos and figure it out. It's just fascinating to me. I can't wait to hear the next piece.
Yeah.
I'm like this in the Zoom, like
We're both like this.
Ooh.
What's next?
Yeah. I mean, and even the idea of a person with a quote unquote learning disability seeking refuge in the library is an interesting choice.
Well, and the beauty of all of that is that we encourage people to not look at the way things should be. But when you stop doing that, then you make room for the way things could be. So when you stop defining yourself by ways that are, standard or accepted or whatever, based on your circumstances, when you stop doing that and you go, no, wait a minute, I don't want that. I don't want that label. I don't want that definition. Then you make room for what things could be. And that's exactly what you did. But the fact that you did it at 17 is astonishing. So, I mean, I don't think I have the guts to do that at whatever my age is.
You want me to say it clearly?
No, I do not want you to say it.
Way older than me. That's why I can be jerky about that. Okay, so let's go into the rise part. I'm so anxious to hear. So you do that whole thing, and then what? So I heard you say earlier that you didn't know what the steps were going to be. So did you just do one at a time? Did you plan out 10 things? How did you manage that next piece to rise?
So it was me really just sort of following instinct. And what is interesting is I co-authored a book, Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities, The Path to Pride and Success. And in looking at the research around what allows students with disabilities to go on and have positive post-secondary outcomes, I was just sort of stumbling and doing some of the things that the researchers say needs to happen, right? So I really didn't speak up in my IEP meetings until my last IEP meeting, my senior year. And the real question, the focus became around, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, I wanted to go to college. And I want a 4-year degree. I want a bachelor's degree. I wasn't sure about like, where do you go? I didn't know any of that, but I knew I wanted to go to college. And then my father came. He was at that meeting, and he had my back. And it was like, okay, we're going to make this happen. My IEP team knew about an incredible support program called Project Connections at Middlesex County College. That was a support program for students with disabilities. And so they connected me to that program, and they had to help me to realize that one of the paths to getting a degree was to start out at a county college. Again, I had never seen that as being, there just aren't that many stories. There are maybe more now, but there aren't that many stories of someone who goes to county college and then goes on to do something notable. So so I went to Middlesex County College. I was a part of this program, Project Connections. The lady that interviewed me, and it was a competitive process to get it to be a part of this program. The lady that interviewed me took a look at my transcripts, and Elaine, we're good friends now. Elaine looked at my transcripts, and based on my record, it was like, it wasn't clear that I was going to be able to survive at a regular college classroom. I had spent so much time in, early on in my education in self-contained classes, and then just a lot of basic classes, and basic was the code word for special education.
Right.
But what saved me was that I had one teacher my senior year who was a brand new teacher that I had for basic history, who was also someone they brought in to coach mock trial and mock UN. And he ran an honors level political debate class. So I got to go into this honors level class my senior year. I had one or two other experiences being in mainstream classes. And so she kind of just took a risk and said, you know, we'll give you a spot. And I did very, very well. My first year was an entire year sort of rebuilding myself as a student.
Mm-hmm.
I tested into all remedial classes because my skills were so low. So I had to learn how to do algebra, you know, like with any proficiency. I had to learn how to write. And when I say that, I mean construct sentences, you know, independent clauses, coordinating conjunctions. I had to figure out where the comma goes, all that sort of stuff.
You just
Wow.
made the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
But the environment was so different, right? One was the structure of college, where you just had a lot more sort of free flow to your schedule. It wasn't as regimented. And also the program that I was a part of, this was the first time that I was in what we would now refer to as like an inclusive educational environment, right? Where I no longer had to feel like I needed to hide or I was being segregated from other students. I was in there with everybody else. I was also given the tools that I needed. It was the first time. I remember my first week of class, my counselor sat me down and explained to me what it meant to have a learning disability. No one had told me that when I was a student, you know. And I know we still live in a world where there's still not enough of these sort of conversations happening with students, particularly students with hidden disabilities, where we're just taking the time to explain to them. And I think the value is in an asset-based way where we're talking about the strengths and not just the deficits, not just the challenges. So I got that, and then I started using accommodations. You know, one of the things that's great about like college level math is that everybody gets to use a calculator. And so I struggled with, you know, basic calculations my entire life, you know, what we would kind of call arithmetic back in the day, but you give me a calculator and then all of a sudden math is fun. And then I had a great professor, Professor Sikoriak, for a remedial level writing class, who just broke down sentence structure and how to construct an essay, 5-paragraph essay, how to construct an argument within a research paper. And he just did it in a way that I would actually say was very mathematical. It was just very clear about, you know, there are just these different pieces and they fit together and this is how they relate to each other. And there's the theme, and then you can improv on the theme. And maybe one of the more profound things was that my counselor, Susan, told me to stop worrying about spelling and just write. And so
Good advice.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
woke up in the middle of the night and just started writing. And those were my first poems.
Wow. Wow. You know, you mentioned, I think in our school district, it's called Model UN. I think you said mock UN. That was actually a turning point for my middle son, Mitch, when he went and did that. Now, Mitch is actually, he's in the top 3% for his SAT scores. He's brilliant, right? And he also has the blindness thing, but he just doesn't thrive in the typical learning environment of the K-12 school system. So it's always been a song and dance to try to get him to activate that brain and use it. And then he did Model UN, and I couldn't believe that he did it. First of all, it was one of his best friends was involved. And then he came home like he was Sweden. I had to call him Sweden for like 3 months. He like won everything and everybody's, what's up, Sweden? You know, like this whole thing. He was just charged up. And I looked at him, I said, Mitch, because he was nervous about college. Like, well, you've been making me do this school thing for 12 years. I'm like, I think you're going to love college because it, like you're saying, it's such a different way of doing it. It's just a whole different style, and you can find the different unique things about yourself and find the classes that you love. And I was watching Mary Fran light up too and smile. We're both teachers, and listening to you and watch you light up over certain teachers. That's what it's all about, that somebody connects with you and pulls out your finds that brilliance in you and then uses that as a launching pad for you. It was just really fun to watch you light up over that. What an extraordinary story and I can't wait to share this with folks that think that, we struggled so much with him or her through K to 12, college is off the table, we're not going that route. Like, you just flip that whole thing on its head of, wait a minute, yes, do it. It's a different experience. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'll be the first to tell you that I don't think, everybody needs to go to college. I don't believe that's a reality. I also think that our colleges really need to be careful because I think they're pricing themselves out of the market. I think and so I really, unless you've got an academic scholarship or, you've got some sort of like free ride to an Ivy League or what have you, or your family's got the funds, I think, going the county college route is really smart. I think it's an incredible life hack. I had the opportunity to do 5 years of college, and I think of county college, right? And again, so much of that was about me just sort of building myself back up before I transferred on to New Jersey City University. But I think my father set aside like 20 grand, and it got me through 5 years. Now that was, you got to deal with inflation, now, but still, it was very cost effective.
Yeah.
And even here at Middlesex, they have relationships now with four-year institutions, with universities and colleges where you can do a bachelor's degree at many of our county colleges now.
Wow.
So I really encourage people to look at that. And then, and then I think so much of what college is as well, it is oftentimes a rite of passage. College for many families is also a family tradition, so I think there's something about being able to honor that as well, no matter who you are. And we live in an amazing world, like the co-author of my book, Margot Izzo, her and several people in higher education, there are programs for students with intellectual disabilities to be able to go to college and experience college and go to college classes. Like the doors are really, really wide open now. So I don't, I don't think we, in looking at any one person, should try to place too many limitations on, particularly a young person if they're struggling while they are young. Because I think part of what allows someone to be great is the struggle. It is like building a muscle. You have to have resistance. You have to have weight that you're fighting against. And so the gift of being born as a person with a disability is that, I got to question how my mind worked, right? I didn't just assume. I got to question how I learned. I got to question whether the systems that I was being placed in, whether it be the school system or what have you, was actually designed to work for me. And that questioning, I think allowed me to tap into different ways. And then, I had this I had this great program that I threw myself into. And, in having a counselor sit down and explain to me how my mind worked, being able to look back when I was 9 years old and looking at my first evaluations, on those first IQ tests, and I still remember the blocks and draw a picture of it, all the stuff they make you do. Just being able to look and say, I know that you've gone through life thinking that you were not, smart, and you didn't have much potential, but I can show you here on paper throughout the entire documented stages of your life that you actually, you've got a lot to offer. And giving me that information in a very clear way, it really helped to validate a lot that I had felt about myself, and it helped me just to work harder.
So so much of what I'm hearing is, and it's ironic because it's about challenging assumptions all across the board.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so ironic is that the people that we think of as having the most need, people who are challenged by disabilities, or there's got to be a better word, because disabilities the people with the disabilities are the ones who end up changing things, because they are the ones who have to challenge and have to say, look, this isn't working and I can do this, but I need another way. So it's this whole idea of what you've done in your life is a microcosm of how anyone can look at life and go, this isn't working for me. We need to find another way. And that, I think, is a message that can transcend any kind of situation, whether you have a diagnosed disability or whether you're in a situation in your life where you're like, this isn't working. There's got to be another way.
Yeah, and you have to be brave enough.
Yes.
You have to be brave enough to step into a fire and watch everything sort of burn down, and know that you're in fact a phoenix. You will come out of this and be reborn and be a better version of yourself. And this is another thing I think is, which is kind of significant, and you know, kind of reflecting back to the Eat, Pray, Love analogy, that I think we have everything we need, right? Like, I don't think you really need to, you know, I meet people all the time who are brilliant at whatever their craft is, and they know that they have a message to share to the world. And so it's like, I got a book in me, right? I know I have a book in me, but why isn't it, you know, why I need help getting it out? Well, it's like, okay, well, do you have a TV? You know, like, how much time are you spending watching that TV? But the time you need is being thrown into that, right? You know, like, not all of us have the ability to go on a retreat, you know, but like some of my favorite authors, whether it be, you know, Toni Morrison, who was like writing her first novel, like while driving, you know, like pausing and on a yellow pad, or, you know, or Stephen King, who was on like a kiddie desk in a laundry room, you know, at night writing his first books, right? Like, everything we need is around us. It's within us. And if you have the courage to do what may seem unconventional, you know, like the you that you want is on the other side of that. And then the great thing is that once you've done it the first time, it makes it easier to do it the second time and the third time. And so when we talk about people being lifelong learners, right? Like, we also have to be lifelong reinventors, right? We have to, throughout our entire lives, you know, and I think the times we live in now, COVID has shown us, I mean, like, the people who are able to keep it going are folks who, you know, there's the truth of a safety net, but there's also, you know, having the ability to pivot, to rebuild, to re-examine, and to say, okay, here's what the field is now. I still want to play. What do I need to do?
You know what? I'm sitting here thinking, I wish you were our first guest. You could have saved Mary Fran a lot of gray hair, because all this time that we've been doing this show, I've been going, you know, I did the reset, rise, and reveal with when the boys were diagnosed, and then in my divorce, and then in this, and then in that, and I'm why do I have to keep getting sucker punched and getting back up? Mary Fran's like, it's a process. You do it every single day, and sometimes every minute of the day. And I'm like, well, I'm over this. And I just said last week when we were recapping the whole year, I go, the biggest thing I learned in 2020 is that it is okay. Like, you don't finish, you don't just reset, rise, and you're, you know, brilliance, you're on your trajectory, and then, okay, all the bad stuff is behind me. It is a constant process. Like, we were actually just decided yesterday, I kept saying reset, rise, reveal was a formula. It's not, it's a process. To your point of what you just said, it is a constant. And honestly, LeDerick, when I look at it with that lens and that perception, that my life is a constant process of reinvention and innovating my stuff, it actually makes it exciting and more interesting than living in that. Let me block all the sucker punches. I'm really good at that. But hey, how about we just watch and see what's coming and what I'm going to get out of it, and innovate to move in a different direction. That Mary Fran's like, thank God.
You know, extraordinary people don't have the choice, right? Like, you constantly have to be like, there is no done. There is no state where you all of a sudden don't have responsibilities, or people don't look to you as being a leader and having to solve problems, right? And if like that's what you want, that is not life. I mean, that's just not what it is. So whether you're a parent, you know, or if you're a business owner, there's no like, I built it, it's done, it's fixed, and I can walk away. And I think that's the fun of it, right? I mean, that's the game. And the
Yeah.
sooner that we can all get to embracing that as the reality, you know. And again, it's like there's nothing that's been put on you that you can't deal with, you know. And sometimes that involves, and many times that involves us asking for help. You know, again, I think that's one of the advantages that I found as a person with a disability, is I got real comfortable early on asking for help, realizing that my dreams are oftentimes bigger than my abilities. And so if I want my dreams to be a reality, sometimes I have to call in other people, or I have to use tools. And it's, again, it is something difficult, I think, for many of us to wrestle with, because it goes against an American ethos, particularly as a man, that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, you know, that you sort of, you know, you cut your way through the wilderness, and this is something that you do on your own. And I think all of us have sort of been sold on this sort of idea that, you know, you can do it on your own. To be strong is to just sort of like stand there against whatever forces. But the reality is that, you know, like we like the strongest people build teams. There's a great researcher, Logan, in London, that looked at American entrepreneurs. And what she found was, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 35% of American entrepreneurs are people with learning disabilities. And so why is that, right? Well, these are folks who are able to look at the world in a way which is slightly different than everyone else, right? So as an entrepreneur, that helps you to identify things like market opportunities, right? Like where are people not optimizing, right? You have to be comfortable with failure, right? People with disability, like at some level, everything I go into, I step into kind of feeling like, okay, well, this could go wrong. You know, I don't know, you know, like I'm going to do the best that I can here, you know, and anything as extreme as being bullied when you were younger and dealing with that sort of stress on a daily basis, to, you know, looking at a test, and even though you try, still not maybe being able to put all that you know down on the paper. Like you get used to it to a certain extent, and not even used to it to like accepting it, but figuring out how to deal with it. And then the piece about like asking for help, utilizing tools, right? So, you know, I'm doing this on a laptop, you know, it's got a word processing program. This thing will read text to me. I didn't know that was available when I was a kid. Well, it wasn't. I mean, the technology was just starting to be built, but those sort of accommodations, those kind of supports, you know, and early on, it was actually writing a paper, doing a solid first draft, and then showing it to a counselor so she could read it to me, and I could listen to make sure I picked the right words, right? Right. That is the same strategy that successful business leaders, successful entrepreneurs utilize. You know, like I have investment in real estate. You know, like I don't know how to, you know, gas leaks, plumbing, you know, electric. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I got to call people in, right? I can do it to an extent, but when it gets real, you know, when we go real deep into the deep water, I have to call somebody.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, that's what a company is. It is a group of people, because we know that a collective of people working together, using their tools together, are going to be more successful than one person trying to do it all on their own.
You have said virtually everything. Like I'm scribbling away here at everything that you're saying and all of your stuff, and I'm just lighting up inside, because you have virtually hit on everything that we talk about in terms of being brilliantly resilient. The resilience part of having to be brave and have the courage and go, look, you know what? I got this in me. I'm going to figure this out. The idea of putting your hand up and asking for help and building that tribe. Yeah. The idea of recognizing that your brilliance is not the same as somebody else's brilliance. And if you're not good at something, find somebody else who's brilliant at it and have them help you. It is all just amazing in this idea that there is no done, But before we go, and we could talk to you for hours.
We're done. This is almost
No,
it.
we
Oh,
can't be done yet. We can't be done yet. But I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, oh my goodness. But no, I want to talk about this thing that you talked about. If you have the courage to do what is unconventional, because one of the things that you do is you deliver this message of supporting people with disabilities through spoken word poetry. Which I just, first of all, it gets me so excited because I think, and forgive me if this sounds trite, but I think of you and I think of Hamilton. I think of that idea of delivering these really important messages in a creative way that makes people go, oh my gosh, and they finally get it because of the delivery. So I want to talk about your spoken word poetry and how you've taken this mission of helping people with disabilities and getting that message out there in this incredibly creative way.
Yeah, so I learned how to write at County College. I actually declared myself as a mathematics major after my first year. And so I transferred with a 3.75 GPA, went on to New Jersey City University. And throughout that entire time, while I was a college student, I was working part-time doing retail and I had a whole bunch of other things going on. I was also becoming a performance poet, performing in venues here in central New Jersey. Every so often I'd pop in and out of Philadelphia or New York, but I was really based in New Jersey. Early on in my life, I was a visual artist, so I could draw, but I realized that I could write as well, and I could perform. I could be up on stage in front of people. And so I at that time, the art was reflecting me wrestling with having these two identities of being a Black man as well as a person with a disability. And so I was creating this work that was a reflection of where I was at that time. My last semester at New Jersey City University, I'm getting ready to graduate. I graduated with honors. I got a BA in mathematics. I minored in fine art with an emphasis in painting. I had also gotten to the point where I was going out and sharing my story with other people, particularly young people. And our friend Bob Hall, through Bill Freeman at the New Jersey Department of Education saw me on a panel and asked me to speak at a conference. And then Bob called me up afterwards and said, I heard you did pretty well. And we're doing these leadership conferences for kids with disabilities here in the state, and we need an MC. And I've been MCing open mics, so that was cool. And he said, and we also need you to do a keynote. So I was like, all right, yeah, no problem. I hung up the phone. I turned to the person next to me. I was like, what's a keynote?
Sure, I can do it. And then you figure it out later.
But what I found was the poetry that I had been creating and still was creating, it was for those young people, right? And it was for the educators who were working with them. It was for the people who were looking to employ them, right? Like that, when you talked about your son going to model you in and getting excited, like it's about kind of like finding your people, right? Yeah. All of a sudden I realized this was my audience. These were the folks who I was creating all this art for all this time. And so I've been fortunate that I travel all over the United States. I do work internationally, all around improving the outcomes of folks with disabilities. And I'm continuously writing poetry because I know the value, I can go very, very deep into research and pull out the nuggets there. I know what the best practices are. And I can work a PowerPoint really well, but human beings, spoken word is the first way in which we learn. Yeah. Right? Like it's the first way information has been conveyed. And so before Gutenberg's technology and the printed word, even like if you think about MCs, your first rappers were griots in Africa. And these were people who would learn the entire history of their people and then in a rhythmic way recite it to everyone. They were walking libraries. And yeah, I know it's the way to connect with people. So yeah, spoken word has become my vehicle. And I think all of us employ a degree of it when you do any kind of presentations. It's not uncommon to use a quote or to even recite someone else's poem. I'm just fortunate that I can write my own.
It's really, There's something about, and especially the way you deliver your poetry, and there's a blind poet, Dave Steele, that's a friend of mine. Same thing. There's something about the cadence of it, the rhythm of it, that for me, I guess that's why it is called an art form. I hear it and retain it and experience it better with your style of delivery and the style of poetry, as opposed to hearing a speech, reading the poem myself. There's just something artistic about it that really goes right to my heart. And I hadn't experienced poetry in a long time. And then Dave Steele, he does these poems, he performs them on Facebook, just about him losing his vision. Okay, I have been in the losing your vision field for 20 years and just heard him a few months ago, and I was enthralled that what is it? Is it the shorter way, or the cadence? What is it that is it's just unbelievably, it touches people.
So I think on one level, all good writing is poetry, right? So, even if you think of prose.
See, Kristen, I write poetry.
Right.
Right. Now she's gonna say she's a poet and I'm not. Like, okay.
Right. So you'll find poetry, and the devices of poetry kind of injected into any really good writing. Part of what you're experiencing is something, again, that works on a very neurological level, right? Like I think that we've all had the experience of there being a song that keeps showing up in a commercial or maybe on the radio or what have you, and you can hate that song but learn every word of it, right? But it's because it's using mnemonics. It's using the tools of rhythm and rhyme and melody, things that, again, our brains just lock in on. And again, I think there's also just the power of someone standing or sitting in front of you and in a very deliberate way saying something that is true. And it's great to be able to see it on a page. Like I can read a play, but to see the actors.
Yeah. There's something about the humanity that's delivered when you see someone deliver that spoken word poetry. There's a connection that's just slightly missing when you're reading it, because you're also getting someone else's, interpretation and their beliefs and everything, whereas you're not putting your own into that, which is what you do when you read. You read it through your lens as opposed to seeing it through someone else's lens. So dare I ask, is there any poetry that you can lay on us right now? Do you have a couple of lines? Is there anything that you can throw at us? Because I would love to hear some of it.
Yeah. How much time do we have?
It doesn't matter. Just keep going, because we're loving this. Just go.
Okay. So let me dig this out. So this is the latest poem that I've sort of published, put out in the world. And my friend Justin Wu helped me to create an incredible video for this. So it's called Until Every Barrier Falls. I'll give this a shot. All right. This is for the ones who would not be trapped. Okay, and before I do it, I wrote this because 2020, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act. Mm-hmm. And the ADA, and this sort of celebrates the ADA, but also just all the work, the many, many generations of people who helped us to get to the point where we are today.
Awesome.
This is for the ones who would not be trapped behind exclusion's shameful wall. And this is for the ones who will continue to push until every barrier falls. This is for every wounded warrior who came home and challenged our grateful nation to elevate its expectations. This is for the ones who blocked the buses, sat in the sit-ins, and crawled to the Capitol. This is for the protesters, the marchers, those adapt angels with wheelchair wings who troubled the waters of their time so that this generation might live in a more inclusive now. As I write this, all over America, monuments are falling, and only questions stand atop each empty pedestal. As I recite this, I hope an artist is listening and will respond with marble and bronze. But until then, Ed Roberts, Judy Heumann, this poem is for you. Let each line chase the light in your smiles and trace the contours of your commitment. Let these words salute those dedicated to the ideals that equality sprouts from the branch of equity. Independence is the flower that grows from access, and freedom is rooted in the soil of advocacy. This is for the ones who have embraced the reality that humanity is both fragile and mighty. And when we ask for help, it is not a sign of weakness, but instead is an indication of our determination. However you navigate, it is legit. This is for those who read with their eyes, ears, and fingertips. This is for the minds that dance in details, and for the wide-eyed ones who remake the world with every thought they think. We are the river of innovation from which the whole world drinks. And who am I? I am a lover of words, left heartbroken by every spelling test. In school, my desk was in a classroom at the end of the hall, so this poem is for me too. Within me is the meeting of two movements. I am Black and blue. My disability is hidden, and I am the descendant of those who could not hide. I am your neighbor, your countryman, one of the poets our nation has produced. And here is what I know to be true. This world is not enough. And if this here is what we call normal, I say, let's be different. Let us on this day celebrate every shape, every color, every way. Let our actions commemorate the array of our being. Build a future in service of the multitude, and let this century be the wilderness from which our better selves are born.
Oh my God.
I'm literally tearing up over here. Oh my gosh, that was astonishing. What a gift.
What a gift is right. You're a gift. That was a gift. You're brilliant,
You are
LeDerick.
brilliant. And we
Verbalize
are
everything that is in my heart, everything that I want this world to be. Okay, it's not often that Kristen Smedley is speechless, and I am. You're magnificent.
fantastic. I can't even tell you it, everything that we talked about, you just gifted us with in that piece. And it touched my heart. I know it touched Kristen's heart, and yet said so beautifully everything that we have been talking about up to now, but it was delivered almost in a song. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And please now tell everybody where we can get more of LeDerick Horne, because we need more of your message and we need people to know about you and your work. So where can we
live on
find
your street? I need to be your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to do now. That's what I'll do. I'm going over to Jersey. See you, Mary Fran.
Okay. I'll be right behind you in my car.
So
Anyway.
the best thing is just my website, which is just my first name.com. So LEDERICK, LeDerick.com. You can reach out to me there. I have a newsletter, and I'm actually developing a 6-part video course now to help parents and educators help their young people, the young people in their lives, to really own their disability, take those first steps towards being a self-advocate. And we're going to start putting information out about that very soon. So the website's great. And then just Facebook. I'm active on Instagram. And if you search my name in YouTube, just LeDerick Horne, Horne, I have a channel that comes up, and you can see segments of me, speaking to groups or doing poetry. And the poem I just did, again, I'm very proud. We went to DC and recorded an amazing video. I got just a bunch of really great people who collaborated in helping me to create a video for that poem.
Is that available on your YouTube channel?
It is it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, Until Every Barrier Falls. And if you search that with LeDerick, I got one of these unique names, so it'll come up even at the top of Google.
Oh, just put LeDerick in, and
yeah, just put LeDerick.
Brilliant videos come. I was watching one, and I wanted to ask you this before we go, if this was on purpose. But I was watching the one now I can't think of what it was. It was something about a dream, and it had the words were there, but they were popping up in all different kinds, almost like the way that you were talking. Is that on purpose for folks that can't hear you? Or is that just a cool artistic thing that you did?
That was so the folks at again, the co-author of my book, Margot Izzo, she's at Ohio State University, and she works with an incredible videographer who's also a person with a disability, whose story we feature in our book. And that was just his idea, you know, like there are all kind of ways to do captioning. And he just kind of picked the words and just make them pop and did it in a very animated way. So that's,
it's so cool go and check out these videos, because I was thinking for the hearing impaired that are watching the captioning, it really gives the cool and the joy of those words that you were saying, as opposed to they just have to, you know, see them scrolling across the bottom. That was really cool.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of effort to be able to get it animated like that.
Yeah,
well,
and patience. I don't have any patience, so you won't see me being able to do that.
And then
I can't do the animation.
I know I mentioned it a few times, but also a lot of the stories that I told today, and then a bunch of resources are in the book I co-authored.
And what is the title of the book?
Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities, A Path to Pride and Success. It was published by Brooks, and you know, it's helped a lot of people.
Awesome.
Well, this will be an episode that we will be kicking off 2021 with, which is Make This Your Most Brilliant Year Yet. And you have certainly given everybody all of the tips and tools to begin to do that. And we are so grateful that you joined us today. So everybody, please go out there, check out LeDerick Horne, his masterful poetry, his amazing philosophy, the book, and especially his advocacy for helping people with disabilities to reset, rise, and reveal their brilliance to the world. And thanks for joining us, everybody. And we will see you next time on the next episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live.